On this edition for Sunday, January 10th, lawmakers weigh impeachment in the aftermath of the Capitol riot. COVID cases continue to rage across the country as states step up vaccination efforts.
Everything is on the table for this country, and we need to recognize that.
And Dan Rather on America at a crisis point. Next on PBS NewsHour Weekend.
Won't be the last time that we're going to have to deal with this reality.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Sue and Edgar Wachenheim III, the Anderson Family Fund, Bernard and Denise Schwartz, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg, the Leonard and Norma Clorfine Foundation. We try to live in the moment to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments.
For 25 years, Consumer Cellular has been offering no-contract wireless plans designed to help people do more of what they like. Our U.S.-based customer service team can help find a plan that fits you. To learn more, visit consumercellular.tv.
Additional support has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. President-elect Joe Biden reminded the country today that he will take office in 10 days using Twitter, a platform that has suspended President Trump's account for inciting violence. The president stayed in the White House again today as federal agencies track down and arrest some of his supporters who attacked the Capitol last Wednesday. 5 people died in the rioting. At least 195 members of the House of Representatives have signed a proposed article of impeachment that could be voted on as soon as Tuesday. The Democratic-controlled House could impeach President Trump for a second time and before Inauguration Day, but House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn said today the House could then delay sending any impeachment articles to the Senate for a trial to keep the focus on Mr. Biden's first 100 days in office.
Let's give President-elect Biden the 100 days he needs to get his agenda off and running, and maybe we'll send the articles sometimes after that.
A conviction in the Senate would require a 2/3 majority, all of the Democrats and 17 Republicans. Senator Patrick Toomey of Pennsylvania is now the second Republican senator after Lisa Murkowski of Alaska to suggest President Trump should resign.
The best way for our country, Chuck, is for the president to resign and go away as soon as possible. I acknowledge that may not be likely, but I think that would be best.
As Congress weighs impeaching Mr. Trump, there are new reports that the president interfered in Georgia's election results beyond his now public phone call to Georgia's Secretary of State. The Washington Post reported yesterday that President Trump called a Georgia election investigator and pressured him to, quote, find the fraud in a phone call shortly before Christmas. Legal experts told the Post the president's attempts to intervene in an ongoing investigation could amount to obstruction of justice or other criminal violations, but may be difficult to prove. The president has not commented and made no public appearances this weekend. There are reports his supporters plan another protest in Washington next Sunday. This Tuesday, the president plans to travel to Texas, where he is expected to talk about his administration's completion of 450 miles of border fences, walls, and barricades along the border with Mexico. For context and perspective on what is happening in Washington, D.C. and across the country, I spoke with Dan Rather, former CBS News anchor and author of What Unites Us, his latest book. Dan, considering that you have covered the challenges that America has faced, both foreign and domestic, over your decades of reporting, what went through your mind when you saw this on January 6th?
My first thought was, I never thought I'd live to see the day. My second thought was, I never even feared this would happen because I thought I just didn't, it never entered my mind it was possible for this to happen. I recognize that intellectually that you can't support that, but that's what I felt. And then right behind that was boiling, real concern and fear for the country, where we might be headed. And then, of course, anger, at least bordering on outrage. I try very hard never to reach that point. But the anger about who and what had brought us to this point where we were humiliating ourselves in front of our own eyes and certainly in front of the eyes of the world. All of those emotions were packed into just nanoseconds when I first saw what was happening.
As you've been pointing out for years now on social media platforms, on through your Facebook page and through your Twitter feed, so much of this comes from the lack of our ability to discern fact from falsehood. It just boggles my mind that we live in this ecosystem where the truth that we kind of took for granted is hard to come by.
Well, I think it boggles everybody's mind, including my own, because we're still on the first faint edges of this whole new world of social media, the internet's great possibilities for good, such as educating and giving truthful information, but on the other hand, the dark side, which you have pointed out so well, which has to concern us all, that misinformation, outright lies, propaganda, all of this gets loose on the internet. This is a very concerning time, which is one reason, I'm an optimist by nature and by experience, but we have to be realistic. We all know that part of being an adult is to recognize that you have to deal with what is real, reality, not what you hope will be. And the reality for us now is it's all on the table, to use a poker term. Everything is on the table for this country. And we need to recognize that we can have a great future, a future bigger and better than anything our fathers and mothers ever dreamed of. But we have to move because we're teetering on the imbalance here, if you will, of just what you described, the world in which truth is rarely pure, never easy to come by, and increasingly difficult to sort out. And I am concerned, and I think this is the question within your question, how we deal with the fact that over 76 million Americans voted to put Donald Trump back into office. And a very large majority of those are now convinced that our new president-elect, Joe Biden, is illegitimate. This is a danger within, and the events at the Capitol, which sort of brought things to a head for the moment, won't be the last time that we're going to have to deal with this reality.
So let's say best case scenario that there is a transition of power, hopefully a peaceful one on January 20th. The challenges that Joe Biden faces are unlike any that any previous president has faced, of a huge proportion of the electorate who finds him illegitimate.
Well, I agree that it is, to use 2020's most overused word, unprecedented in our history. But here's what we have to say to ourselves: hold on, take a deep breath, and steady. There have been times in American history before, plenty of times, one example being the 1930s and 40s, when we had a deep and abiding depression and a building World War II, when incoming presidents, such as in this case Franklin Roosevelt in the early 1930s, faced tremendous obstacles and great problems. Now, it's true that Joe Biden comes into office. I think his two immediate challenges are obvious. One is we have to get the virus under control. It's a disaster and an outrage and a humiliation that the distribution of the vaccines is where it is. But the great hopes that Joe Biden can get that moving along, but we have to deal with the virus and deal with the economic damage. Those are the two immediate challenges for Joe Biden, but nothing is greater than he has to move as quickly as possible to do what is possible. There isn't a lot he can do, but he has to do what he can to bring us back together, to identify those things that unite us, work on those things, listen to the opposition people who didn't vote for him, and hope we can pull ourselves together. It's a tremendous challenge for him and for the country.
In one of your recent tweets, you said, we must cultivate hope while demanding justice. How do we do that?
Well, we're going to find out in coming days about administering to justice. First of all, I do think we have to keep our hopes alive and realize that we are a very resilient people. We can do this, but we got to get ourselves together to do it. And at the same time, we can't just brush over what has happened, for example, at the Capitol. That's just one example, perhaps the worst example. And we do have to demand justice, whether that's the passing of new articles, an article of impeachment against President Trump, or moving in the courts as the months go by. But there can't be hope for moving in the future unless we adjust ourselves and address ourselves to justice. Just covering it over and saying, well, that's in the past, we need to move forward, we need to forget it all, I don't think is in the country's best interest.
Dan Rather, the book is called What Unites Us. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you very much.
The United States continues to battle the coronavirus pandemic as cases surge in all regions of the country. The U.S. recorded more than 250,000 new cases yesterday, bringing the total number to more than 22 million. This past week saw a 34% increase in new daily coronavirus cases compared to the previous two-week average, according to the New York Times database. There were more than 3,200 new coronavirus deaths yesterday as the country approaches a total of 380,000 people who have lost their lives to COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic. As the virus continues to spread, getting Americans vaccinated remains slow. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, fewer than 6 million people have received their first dose, far less than the 20 million the federal government projected by the end of 2020. In parts of Europe, cases also remain high. Demonstrators protesting coronavirus restrictions were out in the capital of the Czech Republic today, despite the country having one of the highest daily COVID-19 cases per capita in Europe. And in the United Kingdom, residents remained under a tight shelter-in-place order as a new, more transmissible strain of the coronavirus continues to spread. With close to 81,000 deaths so far, British health officials say they are racing to vaccinate 15 million people by mid-February. For more on the U.S. rollout of COVID-19 vaccinations, I spoke with Caroline Chen, who reports on public health for ProPublica. Caroline, we have gone from tracking the number of cases and deaths, which are still, by the way, increasing. People are also as anxious about tracking where and when they can get a vaccine. And it seems pretty disparate depending on the state, depending on the city, depending on your age. There's not sort of a uniform rollout here.
Yeah, and I think that this is, once again, a similar picture to what we saw previously with testing. This is the way that it works in the US, that the states have their own ability to run vaccine distribution. So we are going to see 50 different pictures, 50 different stories, because the CDC can only give guidance over what order you give out the vaccine, and then it's up to the states to actually manage distribution. And in fact, it's going to go down to the facility level, which is what's happening right now, because even though by and large every state agrees that frontline healthcare workers get it first, once the vaccines are delivered to the hospitals, it's up to the hospitals to decide who within their facility gets it first.
What does the guidance from the CDC say? Is it the elderly and then the elderly with immune compromised status or pre-existing conditions? I mean, how do you prioritize?
So what's called phase 1A right now, which is in the CDC guidelines, is frontline healthcare workers and nursing home, long-term care facilities, which is a pretty small population, but as we all understand is an absolutely critical population to get the vaccine. And then after that, phase 1B is where there is some wiggle room and state to states are interpreting it differently. But by and large, so sort of the next tier is going to be elderly, especially elderly with pre-existing conditions. Some states are adding sort of that clause onto that, and then essential workers.
Also, there's been kind of a debate on whether or not we should just double the amount of vaccine that's available to everyone by not necessarily making 2 doses available. Is there a legit scientific argument there, because you're still getting some protection, which is better than no protection, even though it might not be as good as the double dose?
This is where the UK has been trending. And there are scientific reasons why a lot of immunologists say this may be something that you can do. They point to some people in the trials where you can see even after 1 shot, there was pretty good efficacy and pretty good protection. However, for now, the FDA and the CDC as well, Dr. Nancy Messonnier has really been on the side in the US of saying we should stick to 2 shots because that is what was tested in the trials. That's what the FDA has authorized. And, whatever we do in the US, my biggest concern actually is that we communicate it clearly to the public. So if we've been sending these messages. You have to get your 2 shots. You have to get your 2 shots. You have to get your 2 shots. Wait a second, you only need to get 1 shot. It's going to be confusing. So my hope would be for consistent, clear communication wherever, again, the science leads us.
The other thing that people are very concerned about regarding the vaccine right now is the news of these other strains that seem to be more contagious, whether or not these vaccines will protect them from the mutations of a virus which naturally occur.
So right now we do have 2 variants, one that is commonly known as the UK variant and one that's coming out of South Africa that we seem to, the data is pointing towards them being more highly transmissible right now. And that is a concern. As far as we have been able to see, we have no reason to think that the vaccine is not going to be effective against them. So that's good news. However, one thing that I'd point out is that the more cases there are out there, the more widely spread the coronavirus is, the more chances it has to continue mutating and to produce more variants. So this is not the time for us to say, oh, great, there's a vaccine, we can lower our guard, and it doesn't matter if we have more cases because the vaccine is on its way. Like, we have to continue to be vigilant right now and not give the coronavirus more chances to mutate and produce variants that might be able to escape our vaccine.
So really one of those things, if somebody in our audience is lucky enough to be getting a vaccine soon, is that does not give you the license to just sort of take off your mask and start hugging strangers.
What the trials have shown for Moderna and Pfizer's vaccine is that it is highly, highly effective in protecting you from getting sick. Does it protect you from being able to carry the coronavirus, like pick up the virus and then spread it to someone else? That is something that has not been 100% answered by the trials. And it's highly likely, but for now, even after you've gotten the vaccine, because we don't have 100% data, continue to wear your mask. And also because it's an important social signal, you've got to continue to encourage other people to wear masks. So we have to have this social signal to encourage other people who have not yet gotten vaccinated to continue to wear their masks as well.
All right, Caroline Chen of ProPublica, thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Indonesian authorities say they have found the location of 2 black boxes from the plane that crashed into the Java Sea yesterday, with 62 people on board. According to local officials, 12 vessels have been deployed on a search and rescue mission. So far, divers have located debris from the plane and human body parts, but no survivors. Pieces of the wreckage were brought to the capital, Jakarta, today. The plane, carrying 12 crew members and 50 passengers, was headed to the western region of the country before it disappeared from radar shortly after takeoff from Jakarta. 4 people have died in Spain after 20 inches of snow fell over a large section of the country this weekend, the worst snowstorm there in decades. In Madrid, emergency crews worked to clear roads, while airports and rail lines were shut down in many areas. Government officials urged people to remain at home and said convoys would begin delivering food and supplies, including COVID-19 vaccines. While the storm has eased, the forecast is for dangerous weather in the next few days, with freezing cold turning the snow to ice, causing power outages and stranding thousands of people. For more of Dan Rather's interview and the latest national and international news, visit pbs.org/newshour. In response to last week's violence at the Capitol, some have compared the unrest here to that of other countries, such as in Latin America, which has a turbulent history of political upheavals. NewsHour Weekend's Yvette Feliciano spoke with Lucia Damert, a global fellow at the nonpartisan Woodrow Wilson Center and a professor at the University of Santiago of Chile, about those comparisons.
So in a statement Wednesday by former President George W. Bush, he described the riots in the U.S. Capitol as, quote, how elections are disputed in the Banana Republic and not in our democratic republic. Many other politicians and political commentators were making similar comparisons, likening Wednesday's events to coups d'etats in, quote, the third world. As an academic from Peru who has studied political unrest and security across Latin America, what do you make of these comparisons and the surprise over the fact that this could happen in the U.S.?
I can see at least a couple of issues here. One is, the complete lack of understanding of what's going on in the U.S. This is very different from, coup d'etats in Latin America. This is something that has been building for a long time. Is linked to domestic terrorism, is linked to the increasing levels of racism and classism, most of political discussions. But on the other side is also the perfect picture of leaders in the U.S. who are not really linked to what's going on in other parts of the world. That in fact, in most cases, when we had coup d'etats, the American embassy was involved in some of those situations.
So when we talk about political unrest and government takeovers in Latin America, can you tell us a little bit more about what the U.S.'s role has been?
When we talk about, civil wars or dictatorships in Latin America, mainly in the 70s and 80s, we had this process of moving towards some ideas of socialism being implemented in Latin America. And for that reason, either the U.S. and some of the armed forces in Latin America, in cases such as Chile, Argentina, Brazil, but also Peru, Ecuador, and others, there was a fight towards what type of model of development we will have. And in that sense, military personnel, along with economic elites, moved into these coup d'etats that actually put aside any possibility to move forward into a more socialist type of model. And in that sense, most of the actions of the US during the 70s and 80s were mostly linked to their economic and political agenda. That of course it was, against socialism or communism. And in most cases, we have even documents that show, participation in harboring or helping, armed forces and political elite people to do these things.
How do people in Latin American countries such as Chile, Argentina, respond to being called banana republics or part of the, quote, third world? Are those descriptions appropriate or are they pejorative?
Yeah, they're pejoratives, of course. And we are pretty much appalled for what is going on in the US. We are very surprised of how fragile the system was. I think that, nowadays we are more in a hemispheric area more than ever. And actually, we share many problems, one of them being inequality and lack of education.
Lucia Dammert of the University of Santiago in Chile and the Wilson Center, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. It's great to have been with you.
This is PBS NewsHour Weekend, Sunday.
When it comes to vaccinations per capita around the world, the small nation of Israel has taken the lead, inoculating more than 1.5 million people. But can the country keep this pace? Yvette Feliciano has a story.
It's Monday in Tel Aviv, and a medical compound set up for COVID-19 vaccinations has hundreds waiting to get their first dose.
We are doing that in a pace of around 5,000 to 7,000 a day here in this huge operation.
This pace means more than 19% of the population has been vaccinated since mid-December, 10 times more than in the US, and the most so far in the world. Medical workers and the elderly come first, but given the country's relatively liberal approach to giving vaccines, even younger Israelis are waiting in line. The country of about 9 million was also quick to sign deals with pharmaceutical companies, covering about 75% of its population. And when it comes to delivery, Israel has taken advantage of its small size. Uri Get-Palash heads the distribution company SLE.
We do the division of the Pfizer packs. We divide them to smaller packs of 10, 15, and 50 vials, so it can be shipped even to very small point of vaccination. And by doing so, we avoid unnecessary waste.
But the speed of distribution has the country burning through its supply. And a surge in new cases means the goal to get the whole country immunized by spring might be slipping away. As pressure grows over dwindling supplies of vaccines, the government is once again turning to the negotiating table, this time to get more deliveries sooner.
NewsHour will continue to cover the possible impeachment of President Trump, the investigation and arrests of pro-Trump supporters who attacked the Capitol, and all the events over the next 10 days leading up to the inauguration of the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden. That's all for this edition of PBS NewsHour Weekend. For the latest news updates, visit pbs.org/newshour. I'm Hari Srinivasan. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and have a good night.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Sue and Edgar Wachenheim III, the Anderson Family Fund, Bernard and Denise Schwartz, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg, the Leonard and Norma Clorfine Foundation. We try to live in the moment to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments. Additional support has been provided by Consumer Cellular and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.